So hey everyone, thanks for coming. Good evening. My name's Andrew Nusca. I'm a senior editor at Fortune. And this is Getting Engaged, Marrying Social Media and the News. We have a great panel this evening. Some really awesome folks who are really in the trenches on this subject. So let me introduce them. This is Rubina Filion. Is that how you say your last name? Filion. Pardon. She's the social media editor at the Wall Street Journal, and she's class of '07. Next to her is Andrew Springer. He's the senior editor of social media at ABC News, and he's class of
2011.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on a game show.
It was a good year. It was a good year. And next to him is Sheena Lee, content and community manager at Qwiki, a startup, and she'll explain what that is in a minute, and she's class of '09. So before I begin, I just want to thank Columbia's Office of Alumni and Development for putting this together. It's a really great thing, and we're really excited about it. If you want to live tweet, or anything else for that matter, you can use the hashtags SOC Media News and CUJ14. And we really do encourage you to tweet, like we're going to check after, okay? Like we're going to retweet your tweets. Okay. So without further ado, I'd love for each of you to give kind of an introduction and explain what it is you do. What do those titles mean in 2013, almost 2014? Just left to right is fine.
Okay. So as you mentioned, I'm the social media editor at the Wall Street Journal. And what that means on a day-to-day basis is I spend a few hours managing our Twitter and Facebook feeds. And the rest of the time, I basically work with reporters and editors. We have about 1,800 reporters and editors around the world, and I'm helping them improve their presence on social media. And I'm also working on engagement projects with our interactive graphics team, with our video department, and on any upcoming projects that come up. I spend a lot of time training and thinking about innovation and just coming up with ideas for increasing the reader engagement and just doing cool projects with people on our team.
I'm Andrew Springer. I have my phone out because I'm monitoring Twitter right now. So
Yes.
My handle is ASpringNY, and that's really the only way I'm going to see your tweet. So ASpring, like Andrew Springer, ASpring NY, like the city, New York, that you're in. So I oversee social media for ABC News. It's a television network. Some of you used to maybe watch it. Just kidding. I'm sure you do every morning on Good Morning America. I oversee a team of like 6 or 7 people who either have full-time jobs in social media or part-time jobs in social media where they do social and digital. Across the shows, we manage the accounts. We're in charge of social news gathering. There's some training involved. And then there are bigger picture projects because I think unlike my co-panelists up here, we spend a lot of time thinking about not only how you engage with our site, but how you engage with our broadcast. And how can we get you to think and engage with Nightline, or how we can think and get you to engage with somebody like George Stephanopoulos or Diane Sawyer and make our broadcast all that more engaging and interactive and more meaningful. And then the social news gathering part of it too is how do we make our news division stronger when it comes to good quality journalism. And that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Sheena. So I work at a startup called Qwiki, Qwiki, and the company was actually acquired by Yahoo in this July. So now we're technically part of bigger Yahoo. So my job is a little bit more complex. I wear a lot of different hats. Pre-acquisition, we looked at a lot of innovation in terms of how to develop technologies to innovate social media for news. So we worked with companies such as ABC News, we worked with Time Inc., we worked with Yahoo, we worked with MTV on how to develop new platforms for video storytelling. We also developed an app at the same time, which allows consumers to storytell themselves via through their iPhones in just a few steps. So I manage a lot of the community, the content, and as well as their relationships with editorial from different media companies and And just, yeah, to think about new ways to look at video storytelling, to look at news, to look at social videos. So, yeah.
Thanks, guys. So we're going to start broad, and then we're going to kind of work our way into the issues. So that was a great kind of segue into what I was going to ask you next, which is, how does your organization view social media? Andrew, you touched on this a little bit in your introduction, but I'd like all of you to answer, what role does it play? For some, it's outreach. For some, it's kind of a customer service aspect to it. For some, it's breaking news, right? I'd love to know kind of what role it plays for each one of your organizations.
Well, we try to think of, especially on the if you think of social media in two ways, you have the pushers and you have the takers. The pushing out of content and information, we really believe that that side of social media is about building the brand of ABC News and building our brands, whether our brand is Good Morning America or George Stephanopoulos. It's about building that brand. And that brand building comes from driving traffic, driving tune-in, and driving engagement. On the other side of that, how do you use social media to do your job as journalists and storytellers, we think of social media as just another tool in your toolbox to be a good journalist and to be a good storyteller. And once again, like when we have our trainings, that's what I say, that this is part of your toolbox. Not everything, you're never going to find everything on Twitter or Facebook. You've got to actually go do, sometimes you still got to pick up the phone and call somebody. And to that point, I remember in what was it, April of last year in the Boston bombing, the photo of Dohazar Zanayev face down on the ground with his shirt up. That picture surfaced on social media pretty quickly, but it took the old school, our great producers and reporters in Washington having connections at the Justice Department, picking up the phone and calling the Justice Department, and the Justice Department saying, yes, that is a real photo. Because even though we found it on Twitter, there was no way that we were going to be able to prove that or verify it just from Twitter alone. So on the one hand, it's brand building, and on the other hand, it's a tool for our journalists.
Rubina?
I would say for us, it's pretty similar. It is brand building, but it's also, it's almost like the social media team, are a bridge between the readers and the newspaper and all of our digital properties. It's, we are striving every day to make things like stories or projects more social, more interactive. And so a lot of what we do is we look at a big project that's coming up, like, for example, our arts and entertainment group was really interested in figuring out a way to get readers to engage with the ending of Breaking Bad. Like, this was something that was trending huge on Twitter. They knew it, we knew it, and we said, what can we do about this? So we helped them come up with a strategy where they used Google Forms, Facebook, and Twitter to get hundreds and hundreds of submissions from readers of how they thought Breaking Bad should end and how they would end it if they had the choice. And when we got these hundreds of submissions, we read through all of them and worked with our arts and entertainment desk, and eventually we ran illustrations in the newspaper of the best endings that people came up with, and then we contacted the person who actually got the ending almost completely right, and we were just like, do you work for the company? Like, how did you do this? How did you come up with this? And they gave us an interview. So basically from this project, we had blog posts, we had stories in the paper, we had illustrations, we had interviews, and we were just finding a way, like, we have this content and we want to engage with readers. Another example of this is we just did the WSJ mustache call out, which got us a lot of props.
It was fantastic. I just want to say.
We worked with a startup called Rebel Mouse to kind of pull in readers' photos for Movember. So anytime they use the hashtag WSJ mustache, we decided, is this photo good enough to go up on WSJ.com or not? And we pulled in and we got hundreds of photo submissions once again. And we just anytime that we have something interesting that's happening, we try to figure out how to socialize it and how to get readers involved as well.
On our end, it was more of looking at social on a whole. So there's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's so much going on out there. There's so many stories told across all these platforms. How do you aggregate everything? So we basically built a platform where a user, a storyteller, a reporter, a journalist could go on and could insert their Twitter and then put in an Instagram photo and put in a map, and and put in a picture from, you could put in a video from Vine if you wanted, and have basically aggregate your social media into a story. And so from our end, it was more kind of like looking at it on a bigger level. There's just so much going on, but how can you combine all of this and make it into a video story?
It's fascinating. Before we continue, I want to ask everyone, so how many people here use social media as part of their job? That's pretty good. Yeah, 2/3 maybe. How many people just personally use Facebook? Almost everybody. Twitter? A little less. Instagram? A little less. Vine? A couple stragglers.
Mostly for dog videos.
Yeah. I am definitely guilty of that. Well, that's interesting. I mean, it just goes to show that you've got an engaged crowd right here. The next thing I wanted to ask was kind of how each of your organizations handles it. So we talked about kind of the role it plays, but how are you actually doing this? A few of you touched on this already, but how are you structured? Rubina, for yours, you've got a really, really massive organization, right? A lot of different desks, different topics. How do you structure it? Different accounts, different teams. And then the same for you guys. How is the structure? How do you actually execute what you're trying to do? Rubina, go for it.
So the way that we're split up is we're actually a fairly centralized team. We just recently hired someone, in Europe, and we have somebody in Asia. So we're staffed pretty much 24/7 on the main accounts. And in New York, we have a team of people that basically our responsibilities are to run the social media accounts, the main ones, for a few hours a day, and the rest of the day we are able to kind of work on projects and work on breaking news. What we do have people do is that we have about 90 Twitter accounts, and we have quite a few Facebook pages as well. And we also have an Instagram, Google+, LinkedIn, the list goes on, Pinterest. I'm missing a lot of different social networks, but a Foursquare too, actually. And what we try to do is that we try to get as many desks as possible to kind of run their own social media presence. So our ultimate goal is that we want people to be fairly self-sufficient on social media, which is why we spend so much time training people on how to use it and teaching and giving them the tools that they need. So I guess that's how we're split up.
Before I move on, how do you ensure that you have a consistent voice across? I mean, the journal itself has kind of a consistent voice as a publication. How do you, if you distribute the responsibility, how do you ensure that across continents, platforms, teams?
We have certain guidelines that we put out, and we actually have, for example, yesterday we put out a guide on social headlines, which is an experiment we're trying, which is basically, in addition to writing the normal headlines that editors put out, they usually write a few different versions of them, and one of them is a social headline that'll go out on Facebook and Twitter when it's shared, and Google+ as well. And we put out a memo that said, basically, you want to try to keep this to under 60 characters. You want to make sure you have an interesting fact in there. Basically, you want your headlines to be like tweets and less like just straight up, this is what is happening. So we try to be consistent with our style by training heavily.
You mean we can't be punny anymore in journalism? Right.
I don't know. The name of this panel is Getting Engaged. I think the puns are okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Andrew, tell me more.
So I think I touched on it, basically how our team's set up. Each show has a person or a couple of people, or some part-time people. In a big show like GMA, it's several people who run the accounts at different hours from different parts of the GMA staff. But I think that one of the coolest things that we've done is, of course, we're a pretty large editorial staff. We have a pretty large editorial staff. And what we did during Hurricane Sandy was we actually established the network, the news division's first social media desk to act as a coordination clearinghouse center during breaking news. Because what we have at ABC is we don't just have producers who cut tape. We have desk assistants, and we have PAs, and we have this strange breed of people called a booker. Does anybody know what a booker is in morning television? Yeah. Okay. Well, they're really intense, competitive people because their job is to get people to come. Are you a booker? Where did you book? Yeah, so, but you know how intense and competitive it can be to get that guest to like following people in cars. So we have all these first, exactly, especially if you're, in the middle of the Good Morning America Today show ratings war. But so we have all these disparate groups, and we found, especially during, I think the first time we really noticed this was during the Colorado shootings in Aurora, that we had a lot of people. We had people from Nightline, we had people from Good Morning America, we had bookers, all reaching out for the same things, and we were not effectively deploying our resources. So we came together, and for Hurricane Sandy, is we actually cleared and verified and got guests over thousands of pieces of media from Hurricane Sandy, which I think really helped strengthen our news coverage, and we actually won a Peabody for our Hurricane Sandy coverage because, like you said, it has to be everybody's job. And so now we know that we can call on, when we activate our social desk, we know that we can call on the bookers, or we can call on the PAs and work with them directly, and they know, here's how you reach out to somebody, and this is how you should do this, and what if they want money for that? And because, obviously there are a lot, especially if you're like a professional storm chaser, this is your livelihood. So that's basically how we're structured. But that's only during breaking news and big breaking news stories. I think the last time we fully activated was maybe for the LAX shooting a couple of weeks ago, because we didn't know quite how big it was when it started.
Fully activated. Sounds like there's a big red button somewhere. Engage.
We do have, I pushed for a DEF CON type scale, although I seem to be the only person who uses it.
Yeah. Color-coded threat levels.
It was
perhaps?
color-coded.
No.
And then it became kind of a joke.
Sheena, tell me how your team is structured and how you guys do what you do.
My team is me. I do Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and everything else that needs to be done. But I know at Yahoo overall, there's a huge editorial team from all different countries covering all different topics, and it's divided the same way. Every team, like sports, news, entertainment, music, they all have their social media go-to person. And recently, they've been doing a lot on Tumblr as well. And but the stuff on Tumblr is actually very different than what you would find, compared to even Twitter, Instagram, or it's very kind of a different animal almost. But yeah, it's pretty much divided the same way.
How many people use Tumblr here, by the way? I forgot to ask. Okay, all right, cool. Also a Yahoo property now. We have a question back there.
I'm curious if the groups and organizations you're part of, if you use just the straight native apps for these different social media, or Buffer, or any other kind of scheduling way to push things at the right times.
So I'm going to repeat this for the folks on the live stream. So he's asking if there's a tool that you use to unify your activity, or do you just use the dedicated apps for each particular medium?
For me, I love Hootsuite. It's just a great way. Like when I go to work, I open it and everything is there. With all the times, all the retweets, you can track all these different keywords if you want it. It's just a really useful tool. And if you need something sent out at a certain time, it also does that as well.
So Hootsuite. What else we got?
We use Social Flow and TweetDeck. For those of you not familiar with Social Flow, it's really cool. It's basically you can add in tweets or Facebook posts and have them go out at the optimal moment based on what your followers are talking about, what they think what they would be interested in, and you can set parameters usually on weekdays we tweet every 25 to 45 minutes on the main account, and based on those parameters it'll put stuff out. So we can add in 20 or 40 or 50 tweets and it'll figure out what the best one is to send out.
We also use TweetDeck. We've looked at Social Flow. We've looked at other products as well. We tweet once. And when I say we, I mean for the majority of the day, it's that guy back there, and Micah Grimes, our social media editor for ABC News, tweets once about every 8 minutes.
I think he's doing it right now, actually.
I think he just tweeted a photo of me, and I'm getting lots of tweeted photos of me tweeting. So thank you for that. But my phone's about to die.
I think the world just collapsed on itself. It was a very Inception-like moment. All right, cool. So let's carry on. One of the issues that Andrew, you raised actually, but is a top of mind for everybody in this room, certainly at the journalism school, is around accuracy. You mentioned the Boston bombing, but there have been a lot of indications we've killed Steve Jobs prematurely. Really everything. We've called elections too early. And then, Rubina, you were telling me, or reminding me of the Diane from 7A flight live tweet hoax thing. What's a journalist supposed to do with all of this? This is crazy. How are we supposed to navigate this, be first, or be right, or both, or not? Has this evolved since this was our first concern when this stuff first came around, and we're still talking about it? So, have we changed our mind on things? Because we keep screwing up.
I don't know if it's that we screw up more than we used to. I think people are more attuned to it and more closely scrutinizing the entire media and press for screwing up. These problems aren't new problems. If, for example, let's go back to the early 90s, and you can look this clip up on YouTube. Peter Jennings is anchoring coverage of the O.J. Simpson SUV, the Chase. Remember that? And he gets a guy on the phone who says he can see OJ getting out of the car, and Peter starts talking to him. He talks for him a couple minutes. And then the guy goes, Baba Booey. And that was before there was any Twitter or Facebook or anybody ever thought of that. So these problems are not new. But I think that one of the things I pointed out to you was that I actually think it makes us better. Because at first, when these things did arrive, the question was to be first. And for example, when I started and I was running social media for GMA, it was a Saturday afternoon, and I was in line at Wendy's in the drive-thru out in Queens, and we got an email saying that NPR is reporting that a congresswoman had been shot in New Mexico, and my boyfriend at the time said, you should tweet that from GMA. And I said, I should, and I was the first person to tweet it. And I look back at that now, and I would never do that without talking to a vice president or something today. I think we've gotten so much better, and I think that's because that drive to be pushed has pushed us so much further to the drive to be right. I mean, even Bob Iger, who's the chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company, has said to ABC News, I'd much rather you be right than first.
Yeah, I think the Journal, we are, probably, we are far more careful than a lot of news organizations, I think. Like, we generally have waited, especially during mass shootings and that kind of situation, when everyone is saying the suspect is this person. We're just like, we're not quite sure, so we're not going to put it out there yet. And occasionally that will lead to a little bit of trouble. People might say, hey, that breaking news story actually came out half an hour ago. But when we put it out, generally we're right, because we've taken time to verify the facts on it. I think there's been a whole kind of genre of media reporting that has developed that's just like, this news organization screwed up. And that's kind of, I guess Gawker has started it, but now you can see on BuzzFeed and even on Romanesco, it's like, oh, like, this news organization screwed up, let's all report on it. And it creates this kind of weird echo chamber that's kind of, I think in a way it's almost like lazy reporting too, because it's just the same story over and over again. But it certainly causes some amusement.
But to be fair, I guess you guys are new to that, because our anchors have been in Page 6 forever. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think
and
it's
contract
talks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I mentioned the Diane from 7A thing because it was jumped on by so many different people, and it took 4 days for it to come out that it was a hoax. And the way that it came out as it was a hoax was by the person who started it. So it's, and I don't know if, are you all familiar with this? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. So
They're all on Twitter.
They're all on Twitter. So therefore you saw it, and it was on your Facebook feed. And it took, and basically it's like, this one person who's just like a bachelor producer decides to live tweet a fake conversation with someone, and it goes viral because it's hilarious. But the person who created a storify of it was, I think it was like a CNBC social media editor, and that got 5 million page views, and then BuzzFeed got it and got 1 million page views, and it's like, this is spreading. I'm not quite sure what is going to happen with it. I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, because people are starting to realize that they can get a lot of media attention just by making things up.
Sheena, how do you feel on this issue?
For me, before my current job, I worked at Reuters, and we were really careful. Like, everything needed to be checked. You needed everything from at least 2 to 3 sources. So if you saw something on social media, you can't, because I guess for Reuters, it's really like, people take what Reuters files on the wire really seriously. It's like the AP. So we would have to be really, really careful, not just check once, but twice with 2 people, but 3 people if you weren't sure, and then get the editor's approval and then file it. So it's always better to be right than to be first, for sure.
Yeah, 3 sources, huh? Wow. And sometimes you're first too, not bad.
2 to 3.
One thing that arises about this accuracy thing that, we're talking about something called social media, right? So there's that, not just the engagement of not just the definition of engagement in that we want to have readers' eyeballs always on us at all times, wherever we are as publications, but also that we're giving back to them and interacting with them. How do you guys feel about the peril of the retweet and surfacing, for lack of a better word, content that you're not creating to your audience during a breaking news event, not during a breaking news event, but how do you guys work through that? Because you can't vet stuff and you can't copy edit stuff, and it doesn't always fit in.
Do you mean a retweet from like a random person?
I mean like a retweet, like, let's say the Boston bombing thing. There were a lot of news organizations retweeting other news organizations, but they don't all follow the same standard necessarily. So how do you kind of deal with, you have a pact with the reader that you've established for your own publication, but as soon as you surface content from somebody else, you're just kind of hoping that it fits in. Do you guys have any policies about doing that through your very prominent accounts?
Well, just from the ABC side, we would never retweet another news organization. We would have to confirm it ourselves. We go with the AP sometimes, but it's usually on smaller stuff that we're not going to confirm ourselves, or we'll go with our partners at the BBC when it's something overseas. But to the retweet point, on Saturday night, when Paul Walker from Fast and the Furious died, and I think that TMZ was the first to report that, there was a lot of buzz, and I was actually at home, and I was in a car with friends again, and we got official word from his rep that Paul Walker had indeed unfortunately passed away, and we tweeted it. I tweeted it in the car back home in West Virginia, and I checked it later. I was checked it maybe 10 minutes later, and there was something like 8,000 or 10,000 retweets on that. And the tweet was verbatim, period, at ABC News confirms Paul Walker, star of Fast and the Furious, has died at the age of 40. I checked back 10 minutes later. There's now 25,000 retweets of that. And I thought a lot about what it meant, because I sent out a tweet saying, I can't believe there are so many people retweeting this. And I think that it was 2 things. I think, one, people were really surprised that this guy's dead. He was a very talented, very attractive young movie star. But also for the fact that the people who reported up to then were TMZ and I think Us Magazine. And I think that we were the first major news organization to get out that word that, hey, ABC News is verifying that this is real. And I think that says a lot about some of these legacy brands like ABC News or the Wall Street Journal or NBC or Reuters or AP or whatever it is, because we aren't TMZ and we aren't BuzzFeed, and we're not going to be retweeting Reuters or NBC or whatever. That we're gonna confirm it, and that, quite frankly, is the most valuable thing that ABC News will have 20 years from now. Is that if this company and if we do our jobs as good journalists, we'll still have in 20 years, and hopefully we will. Or more.
That was very eloquent.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
I feel like there should be music playing in the background.
I didn't bring the band tonight.
Fair enough. The flip side of that, the engagement thing, is kind of talking back to the reader. How do we feel about that? And that's both from a customer service, kind of approach where you're just answering the question they may have, to, in some cases, being a little bit, I don't want to use the word snarky, but quieting the haters, so to speak. Do we have policies on any of that stuff for the 3 of you?
For us, we have an internal email that I always direct people to. Like, if you really have an issue, just email us and then we can converse through email rather than through social media. If it's something maybe more problematic, maybe a little bit of an issue. But we don't deal with it as much. because we don't deal with as much breaking news.
Yeah, we try to do reader callouts fairly frequently, and when we get really good responses, we'll either retweet the person, or we'll favorite their tweet, or we'll respond to them and make a joke or something like that. I think part of our job too is to make the WSG a little bit more fun than people associate it with, because we do, fashion and sports and arts
I
and
love the
entertainment.
peeps thing you did for the Olympics. The
Oh
peeps.
yeah,
my
yeah.
gosh.
The Olympics had the sports team is hilarious. Like it's actually really like, and it's kind of we had a big story come out recently in Capital New York about how we're not your father's Wall Street Journal anymore, about Daft Punk and Giselle and how we have them on the cover of WSJ magazine, and so we like to kind of respond to readers and just make jokes to them. Like if they tweet something like, drinking coffee and reading my Wall Street Journal, we'll just be like, sounds like an awesome day. And they just get a huge kick out of it, and you just make someone's day. And probably like 90% of the time they'll tweet something like, getting a reply from the WSJ was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And then we'll favorite it, and they'll get a kick out of that. And it's just, I don't know. I really enjoy that interaction.
Tell me a little bit about the perhaps the conversations around doing that, like making that change, because I mean, this is kind of remarkable if you think about it. We've got a massive news organization and an institution talking to you about what you're doing, in your morning routine. Like, this is unprecedented, I mean, and I realize we're talking about social media here, but what a sea change it's been over the last, decade or so. What was the mentality there beyond, being more fun? I mean, were there kind of guidelines? Were there, how do you know that you're on the right side of that line?
I always do a gut check. If I'm going to do something really funny, like I think it was like so some reader was making a crack about how she learned she had to look up the word anodyne in the dictionary after reading the Wall Street Journal, and I was like, well, I hope we were like an anodyne for your pain or whatever. Like, and I just kind of check with somebody else on my team. I just call them over, and we do this all the time, especially with Facebook and Twitter posts that we're just like, I don't know if this is actually going to go viral. If I change this like a couple of words, it might. Is this too long? Or is this okay? Would this be offensive? Like, we put up a Penelope Cruz post today, and we're just like, are we going to get hate for this? For celebrity journalism? But we do gut checks pretty much every day, probably like 2 or 3 or 4 times a day. I'll call someone over and just say, hey, can you read this? Is this cool to say to a reader?
Interesting. Anybody else have any thoughts on that kind of just approach?
Well, I mean, we do. I think it depends on our different brands. Like, the greatest thing about running the GMA accounts is that you do get to be that friendly. And you do get to, it's like I can't imagine starting my day without Robin and George and a cup of coffee. And then we get some people who just love everything that we do. For example, and I know that she's watching right now because she's tweeting me nonstop, Stacey Ann, our good friend Stacey Ann, who's just one of many people who just love ABC and just want to connect. And so Robin Roberts, who's our main anchor on GMA, had a problem with her bone marrow, stemming from her cancer, breast cancer she had before. And when she came back, actually Stacey Ann, whom nobody really knew before there was Twitter, made Robin this great collage, and Robin was so touched that Stacey Ann came to the studio and got to meet Robin, and there was tears, and Stacey Ann was on GMA that morning. So that's your shout out, Stacey Ann, who is warm in bed and back in New Jersey. But you're funny. It's right, because it is like, who would have thought that ABC News, the network of David Brinkley and Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel, would be interacting with people in this manner.
It's quite a change. Shifting gears a little bit, we've been talking up until now about the outlet as a unified voice, but it's kind of important if we also talk about the individual efforts of social media. I mean, your anchors, for example, editors and writers and so forth, same for us. How do you navigate that, the individual on social media? Sometimes at odds with the brand, sometimes in line with the brand. Talk to me about this within your group.
Well, we actually make an effort to retweet people a lot, like on our
your own people.
Our own people,
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time. We want them to build up their followings. We want them to get the natural rush of having 3.7 million people see their see their tweet, and they just, it honestly, it's just, we use positive reinforcement a lot. Like we will, if we see a really great tweet by a reporter or an editor, we'll email them and say, hey, that was awesome. Like that's what a cool stat. Like you should do more of this. And when we retweet them, that really has the effect of doing that. And sometimes we'll say, no, we won't retweet you when we get a request from someone and it's like just a capped headline with like a non-shortened URL and it doesn't really make any sense. We're just like, maybe you should try this. And 90% of the time, the response that we get back is, thank you so much. Like, this is, we welcome more feedback like this. And so we spend a lot of time just contacting individual reporters and editors to let them know when they're doing a good job and when there's things that they could be doing a little bit better. And we'll tell them specifically, this is what you need to improve upon.
Yeah.
And I think our quality has gone up a lot since that.
I don't want to just focus on Twitter. How do we feel about some of the other platforms? For example, some of the reporters or anchors or editors, putting things on Instagram. Is there a line where perhaps Instagram is still personal, but Twitter is public? How have your organizations kind of navigated this? Are the constant pictures of the dog perhaps not good for the
I don't know,
the paper?
One of my colleagues was evaluating all of our reporters and editors' Instagram feeds, and so he put excellent, good, could work on this. And when he got to my feed, he just wrote Furby, which is my dog's name, because that is what most of my Instagram feed is.
Does Furby have a head cut?
Furby does not yet, but he has been in the WSJ and on the Facebook page.
There you go.
I would say don't tell anyone that, but I guess it's live now. But yeah, we don't really monitor on Instagram as much. Okay, on Facebook, though, we do. If I see, I'm Facebook friends with a lot of people in our organization. I've been there for 5.5 years, so I know a lot of them personally. If I see something on there that I think is questionable, I will reach out to them and tell them, hey, maybe you shouldn't be so pro this candidate or something like that.
Sheena, do you have
Yeah,
kind of approach on this, especially
at Yahoo,
with the acquisition?
Yeah, it's a very collaborative effort almost. I feel like when people are on social media, like they get really excited when they like favorite it, retweet it, and really try to help each other in terms of different entities, different brands. And there's so many different groups at Yahoo that I didn't even know until I got onto Twitter, and I was like, whoa, Yahoo Music, all this cool stuff. Yahoo News, all this great breaking news stuff. Yahoo OMG, celebrity stuff, like whatever it is. We try to promote each other's brands. For example, an event like, New York Fashion Week, like it was very visual and there was just a lot of videos and different people covering it. And so we would just help each other promote these videos and retweet and kind of help promote different brands.
That's actually a great point. The use of imagery, that was something I wanted to bring up briefly. Instead of just putting out text, the thing that sticks out in my mind is when Obama won re-election and they just tweeted that picture of them kind of celebrating, and they didn't even have to say anything, and that went wild. Have you folks, any of you, experimented with this kind of storytelling instead of just constantly tweaking headlines? And I know the appeal because I'm a man of words, but trying to tell it a different way, and that could include video or something else. Depends on the medium, obviously.
Yeah, like for us, it's very video heavy, so it's interesting to see how stories are conveyed through video. For example, again, during Hurricane Sandy, there was amazing footage, that were created by people on the app with their phones of their situations, and during the uprising in Egypt, this kid was in the square and taking all these photos and immediately created a video collage story of what was happening right before his eyes. So in a way, it can be very powerful, I think, compared to text sometimes. But yeah, it depends on the event and on the situation. And I think especially for events where people don't really have access to, they don't really know what's going on. Like I would love to see what some people are experiencing in Syria right now, because we don't have access to a lot of the stuff happening there. So I think pictures and videos can tell a lot and say a lot.
Yeah, we just actually put out a big thing on called Borderlands on Syria, in which you're going to click and see user-generated videos that are verified, and it's just like an inlaid map with like just hundreds of videos.
Wow.
So you should definitely check that out
That's
if you're
really
interested
cool.
in that. But we've also experimented with video callouts, and we have a reporter shot video system called WorldStream, which basically and reporter anywhere in the world can just film a 45-second, up to 45-second segment on their iPhones and upload it instantly using Tout, and it'll be added to this WorldStream. And that was actually created for Twitter, so that anytime they use the WorldStream hashtag, it gets fed in.
Is that with Tout, you said?
Yeah, it's with Tout.
Tout's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. And so my background, before I was a social media editor, I was a graphics editor at the Wall Street Journal, and before that, the New York Times. And the reason that happened is because I took a graphics in the newsroom class here. You guys should sign up because it's a really, really useful class. And that one.
Build up in a minute.
Okay. It was slightly, I had to beg to get into that class, and I'm so glad I did because it determined the next 5 years of my career. So, but
Get out your booking skills.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, but so so I started the Wall Street Journal graphics Twitter feed, which was very popular at Twitter, actually. They just thought it was super cool because we would just upload photos of our graphics. This was a couple of years ago. And we still do that, but now on the main WSJ account and on my own personal account, I'm uploading way more graphics than I ever did before, because they physically show up larger on the news feed, thanks to a change they made a few weeks ago. So I've noticed personally that I probably get like 3 times as many retweets on a given, like people will see, I think I got retweeted by like Ezra Klein today, so I got like, that one gang.
Humble brag. Yeah,
Well, it's Ezra Klein's, but.
yeah.
But basically anytime I include a graphic, it's so much more powerful than just including the text. And we have a really great graphics department, so now that I'm not in it anymore, I can say that without a humble brag. And so we try to promote that as much as possible.
I think that's just a brag.
Can I just say that we talk a lot, and by the way, Ben Ford tweeted me from sunny California, no, there will not be a Will McAvoy moment this evening. But we talk a lot about social, when we put stuff on social, that it's about emotion, and what emotion are you trying to evoke? Whether it's a heartfelt emotion, or whether it's outrage, whether it's sadness, that sort of emotion. And the real wake-up moment for a lot of TV producers in our news organization was during the Boston Marathon. We got the photo from the family of the little boy who was killed at the Boston Marathon, and we posted that to Facebook almost right away, just with the caption of, "This was the little boy, this is his name, he was 8 years old." That day, it was seen by 21 million people. 21 million people. Just that day. It's since gone up, and that's from the number, I don't know if you manage a Facebook page, but it'll tell you at the bottom of the post how many people had seen by, and that is by far our biggest Facebook post
Wow.
ever, which is the picture of the little boy saying, "This was the little 8-year-old that was killed in the Boston Marathon."
Wow. That was actually one of the 2 questions that I was going to end with, which was the one was on emotion and intimacy. These are things that, again, we just don't normally see from a news organization, right? Just tell it, especially in the U.S., tell it straight, How have we, but we know now, especially in this year with the rise of Upworthy and BuzzFeed and Gawker, this version of it anyway, that emotion is really working online and certainly in social media channels, right? I mean, if you really hate something and you share it, you're going to bring all the haters out, and if you really love something, everybody's going to like it, right? It's just like a feel-good thing. How do we, as journalists, both as individuals, but also as representatives of our organizations, our publications, navigate this kind of fraught path? Do we get emotional about some of this stuff? Do we just present it straight like you guys did with the photo of the boy and just say that is it, and it's kind of preloaded emotion just on that basis? How have we changed at all in this?
Well, we actually got a tweet that said, "How do you find the balance between post interactions and putting up news?" And one of the things that Mike and I talk a lot about are, what is it? What's a good story for social that makes sort of evokes a feeling? Like every couple of weeks, a story about this couple who died holding hands or something, or they died a week apart. Those stories always sort of bubble up. And the other question we ask is, okay, what does the public need to know? What should they know, and how can we make that interesting, so that they click on that and get that? Because like there are very important stories going on in the world right now. I mean, one of the things that we've started doing at abcnews.com is writing a complete idiot's guide to blank, or explain it to me like an idiot, like the protests in the Ukraine. I'm from Middle America. I grew up I was poor, almost lost our house, that sort of thing. And I come from that background, and there are a lot of people here, I imagine, who do, and you sort of think and you put yourself in that position, okay, what are they interested in? What is that person who is struggling to pay their mortgage, yet they still need to know? And how do we get that across to them? And I think that's still a big part of our job. And a lot of it is using those same basic principles, the same principles you would use to sell the story about the couple that died holding hands, or Kim Kardashian's newest dress, or whatever it may be, are the same sort of principles you take when you write the story about protests in Kiev. For example, I was in a seminar where some guy was like, don't you think we're becoming too BuzzFeedy, and don't you think that's awful that we're just going to be less? And like, if I can get a 25-year-old guy who's like me to look at a list of 18 ways that Obamacare is going to affect your life, or this legislation about student loans, if that has to be a list, I don't give a damn that it's a list. I'm just glad you're looking at it, because you need to know this. And I don't think, because what I say is that I think that our ways of absorbing stories and absorbing information is changing, and it's our duty as journalists and storytellers to change with it, to still reach those people back home in West Virginia who are struggling to get by, to give them the information that they need to know.
Man, you're eloquent tonight. Sheena, does emotion or intimacy play into what you do?
Yeah, I feel like, personally, I feel like I'm finding out even more about what's happening around the world through Twitter. Like, it's become my kind of like international customized news feed of sorts. I can follow BBC, I can follow Al Jazeera, I can follow whatever I want, and then I can know all these things that are happening around the world. Like when the typhoon hit in Philippines, immediately, like, you have so much information that you can consume thanks to social media in such a short period of time, and you just skim through it. And in a way, it's almost incredible. It's like we're so connected. Like, I don't think we've ever been this connected, ever, especially with stuff happening outside of your own country. And, you can't force people to read certain things, but I think definitely, like, maybe kids these days are having a lot more exposure because of social media to what's going on around the world, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, people kind of knock BuzzFeed sometimes, especially in major news organizations, but I think that the people running it are actually pretty smart. And the last time I was here, actually, Jonah Peretti was sitting in this chair. So I was
you got the Jonah chair, huh?
Yeah, I got the Jonah chair. But he's really brilliant. And what I like about BuzzFeed, and what I like about, actually not so much Upworthy, is that they are looking for stories that people are actually going to care about. And BuzzFeed especially is trying to like expand their investigative coverage and their political coverage and their world coverage. But the idea that news organizations put out stories that people actually care about is a pretty good idea, I think. I mean, it's kind of like if somebody writes a story about earnings and it doesn't really say anything and nobody reads it, was there a point to having it written? Like,
can I just say, and I don't know if this is true, and I'll leave it to the folks at Poynter and Romanesco to prove this, but I firmly believe that it was that post on BuzzFeed about gay people being beat up at protests that sparked the international outrage, the real international outrage about the Sochi Olympics. Mm-hmm. Though that article was shared like 1 million times or something too, don't quote me on that number, go look it up yourself. But that was the first time I had heard about it, and that was, for me, I know that there were activists who had been working on this for a long time, but for me, that was when BuzzFeed set the agenda on something. And I think that's really telling, and if we're not paying attention to that, then I don't know what the hell we're doing.